Hello and welcome to Aware on the Air, presented by members and friends of Aware, the anti-war, anti-racism effort, a local Champaign-Urbana peace group. I'm Carl Estabrook. We're recording this at midday on Tuesday, January 21st, in the studios of Urbana Public Television. My guest is Ed Mandel. Recordings of this series of programs and links to the articles we refer to today can be found on the Facebook page for Aware of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Comments on this program are welcome. Email us at carl@newsfromneptune.com. That's Carl with a C. Our program concentrates on the news of U.S. war-making, which is generally not reported, not by accident, in the U.S. media. Since 1945, the United States government has killed over 20 million people in wars in Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, Latin America, and elsewhere, designed to maintain the worldwide economic hegemony that the U.S. inherited as the only largely undamaged major country in World War II. Russia lost some 27 million people in defeating Nazism. The U.S. lost 500,000 people in World War II as a whole. The cost of the global war on terror, that's by the U.S. since 2001, was recently estimated at $6.4 trillion and 801,000 lives. And the latter is certainly an underestimate. The U.S. killed 1 million people in the invasion of Iraq, and the other casualties from that war crime amounted to many more. Since 9/11/2001, the United States has appropriated and is obligated to spend $6.4 trillion on counterterrorism efforts through the end of this year. An estimated $5.4 trillion of that total has funded and will continue to fund wars and military operations in more than 80 countries around the world. Remember, in the U.S., Congress declares war, but in fact the executive is carrying out war in more than 80 countries in this century alone. An additional minimum of $1 trillion will provide care for veterans of those wars, American veterans, through the next several decades. If you count all parts of the federal budget that are military-related, including the nuclear weapons budget, it makes up 2/3 of the federal budget, and it's inching towards 3/4 of the federal budget. That's what the U.S. government does. We're distracted from war news this week by the impeachment nonsense, but of course that's the political establishment's purpose, to distract you with these shows. Trump, of course, should be impeached immediately for recent war crimes he committed, notably the assassination of a foreign leader for whatever motive, and not for the nonsense in the House resolutions, which are based on his hesitation to provide weapons to kill Ukrainians. His predecessors had few hesitations in such matters. Incidentally, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate for president in the last election, for whom I voted, is one of the few U.S. politicians, even within the Green Party, who has said anything sensible about this presidential murder, the murder of General Soleimani in Iraq. Stein remarked, "Now this is grounds for impeachment, treachery unleashing the unthinkable for Americans and people the world over. Trump asked the Iraqi prime minister to mediate with Iran and then assassinated Soleimani when he came to Iraq on a mediation mission. As a result, the Iraq parliament and prime minister say the U.S. troops should leave Iraq. The prime minister says that Donald Trump called him to ask him to mediate with Iran and then ordered a drone strike on General Soleimani. He says Soleimani was carrying the response to the Saudi initiative to diffuse tension when he was assassinated by the U.S. president." We should also note with the holiday yesterday that Martin Luther King was an anti-war socialist, whatever else he was, and the commemoration of King does its best to lead us to forget that, I think. Ed, what's on your agenda?
So I sort of agree with you to say that had what you said about Joe Stein, bring up the issue of the assassination, that would be closer to a legitimate issue to impeach him than anything that the Democrats actually have in the charges.
I agree with you
So
entirely.
I don't know if I agree with you that it would actually lead to an impeachment, it would actually remove him from office. I would say it would be closer to more legitimate than what they have right now, because right now the charges that they have right now are going to be are not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere, and they don't make much sense.
They don't make any sense. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's totally not, it doesn't make any sense at all. But then again, a lot of things that the Democrats are saying is very loose on reality here. I just want to mention one political issue I suppose I could throw in about during the debates. Elizabeth Warren brought up the issue of sexism against Bernie Sanders.
Right.
That is completely ridiculous. The idea of I mean defending Bernie Sanders. I probably don't even need to defend Bernie Sanders, but to defend Donald Trump or the Republicans in general. I would reassert the fact that I believe that the strongest candidate that the Democrats have right now is Tulsi Gabbard.
Well,
regardless of her position on peace, she actually behaves like a legitimate candidate, and she should, if she would actually be a nominee, she would actually give Trump a run for his money.
I agree with you in the sense of admiration for where Gabbard is.
Yeah.
The notion that she would give Trump a run for his money on the basis of people recognizing what you and I do, that I'm not sure of.
Maybe you could be correct, but I'm just saying I've seen interviews with her, and she actually behaves presidential in a number of ways that literally all the candidates that the Democrats have right now are completely worthless. I mean, Biden barely even knows where he is, and the other candidates, I mean, are like, what the heck?
I agree with you.
And so, I mean, anyways, I'll just leave that there. Right now, they've marginalized her and completely obliterated her campaign for all intents and purposes, with Hillary Clinton obviously calling her a Russian whatever. Yeah. I mean, and so literally, I mean, her campaign has become so marginalized that it's so So I mean, at this point, and I think a few months ago, I think I offered that I thought Elizabeth Warren was going to be the candidate. I don't even know whether it's be Bernie Sanders but I don't think it's going to make any difference. Really, at this point, it won't make any difference.
Well, there is an interesting aspect to the New York Times
Trump will beat
selection of Warren and Klobuchar.
Yes,
that's the.
Well, they're trying.
Them.
They're trying desperately to get the issue back and to find some central candidates for and try not to alienate anybody. But I think at this point it's become almost like a hopeless affair at this point, and the candidates they have left are basically worthless. And for all I know, that on the second ballot at the convention, they may pick someone from out of nowhere. I'm serious.
You and I should keep our tickets to.
But I'm saying the super delegates may come in and to the rescue and pick someone who has no delegates at all. And who knows? It's someone we're not even talking about. And there's been some speculation about that. Who knows? Who cares?
The New York Times, in its endorsement of the two women for president, wrote, and I'm quoting here, Mr. Sanders would be 79 when he assumed office, and after an October heart attack, his health is a serious concern. Then there's how Mr. Sanders approaches politics.
Of course.
That's what the New York Times really interested in.
Of course.
He boasts that compromise is anathema to him. Only his prescriptions can be the right ones, even though most are overly rigid, untested, and divisive. This is the New York Times on Bernie Sanders. He promises that once in office, a groundswell of support will emerge to push through his agenda. 3 years into the Trump administration, we see little advantage to exchanging one over-promising divisive figure in Washington for another. I mean, Trump for Sanders.
Right.
That's the New York Times editorial, and that admits something very important. That's a backhanded acknowledgement of something that's quite true by the leading paper of the U.S. political establishment, that Trump and Sanders are both supported by the burgeoning populist movement, which rejects the neocon and neolib policies, that is, more war and more austerity, of all U.S. administrations for more than a generation. to recognize the similarity, similarity particularly in terms of support of Trump and Sanders, is the beginning of wisdom against the nonsense put up by the New York Times and the other mainstream media about what this presidential election is right. There's something happened here, and you don't know what it is.
One thing I'll interject here, Carl, is I do remember very distinctly that in the 2016 election, in the primaries, Trump was getting a lot of excitement with his crowds, and Bernie Sanders was getting a lot of excitement with his crowds.
Mm-hmm.
So they're literally discounting the two candidates. I mean, leaving Trump aside, literally rejecting a candidate who actually was at one time at least was producing a lot of excitement with the people were connecting with him. And I would think that a Democratic Party was just desperately looking for someone who can you win,
Yeah.
and they're rejecting someone who at least was creating a lot of excitement.
I think the Democratic Party is more concerned, actually, about its progressive wing as represented by Sanders than it is even about winning.
Apparently, yes.
The Democratic Party is so scared of the populist backings for Sanders and the rejection, therefore, of traditional Democratic positions that they're willing to lose to Trump rather than win with Sanders.
Well, that's what's going to happen, I guess.
I think that's what's going to happen, too.
Yep.
But the shocking rejection of the populist demands that Sanders represents by the Democratic Party is the cream of the jest, I think.
Well, there it is.
The interesting note from our friends over at Counterpunch, and I recommend their writings as usual, although I certainly am not 100% in agreement with the things that Jeffrey Sinclair at Counterpunch publishes, but still in all, they pointed out this week, if you wonder what the post-Trump Republican Party will look like, and by post-Trump there he just means after Trump leaves the presidency, however Trump does
4 more years
maybe at the end of a second term, or by impeachment or whatever. As I say, if I had to bet it right now, I'd put money on the end of the second term. But
after that, I mean, there's a lot of changes. Go ahead.
Well, but this is what the Counterpunch article was talking about.
Yep.
He says, if you wonder what the post-Trump Republican Party will look like, take a glimpse at Tom Cotton, one of the U.S. senators from Arkansas. Cotton has waged a relentless campaign for war against Iran and has supported every horror produced by the U.S. foreign policy establishment for the last 20 years. He makes other American hawks look like pacifists. Cotton once said that his only criticism of the U.S. prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where people are held indefinitely without charge or trial, is that too many beds are empty. So this is the man. This is the man who will be the voice of the Republican Party after Trump leaves.
I will say that Trump is much more is different from previous presidents. He is a game changer. I mean, I do believe I think from your perspective, you probably see him as a continuation on certain levels with previous administrations. I think he's a game changer, and I think the deep state that's been repeated over and over again truly has a problem with Trump. At certain levels, and they're really trying to do everything that they can. I mean, they never gave him a honeymoon when he came into office, and they're trying everything they can think of to get him out of there with this ridiculous impeachment charge or with anything, and they're going to fail.
You've been watching Aware on the Air, produced and directed by Jason Liggett and Ethan Young. Thanks to him also, this program and others like it will be available on YouTube and archive.org. My guest has been Ed Mandel. Thanks to our researcher, Jeff Nicholson, whose notes are on the Facebook page for Aware of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. We'll conclude tonight with Aaron Maté interviewing Scott Ritter, the UN weapons inspector and author of a new book, Deal Breaker, Donald Trump and the Unmaking of the Iran Nuclear Agreement. That's the title of Ritter's new book. Maté exposes former Vice President Biden's lie from the most recent Democratic Party debate, in which Biden claims he was voting to allow more Iraqi weapons inspection, not war against Iraq. Former Vice President Biden said, and I'm quoting from the Democratic Party debate last week, Biden said, "I was asked to bring 156,000 troops home from that war, which I did." Many of them were dead. "I led that effort. It was a mistake to trust that they weren't going to go to war when they said they were not going to go to war." He's talking about the Bush administration. "They said they were going to get inspectors in. The world, in fact, voted to send inspectors in, and they still went to war. From that point on, I was in the position," this is Biden, "of making the case that it was a big, big mistake. And from that point on, I moved to bring those troops home." Aaron Mattei points out Biden's explanation that he just wanted to authorize U.S. weapons inspectors in 2003, not a war, is undermined by his own statement. It is, in fact, a lie. Speaking in July 2003, months after the U.S. invaded Iraq, Biden praised then-President George W. Bush and said he would have voted exactly the same way. Biden said in 2003, "Some of my own party have said that this was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place and believe it's not worth the cost, whatever benefit may flow from our engagement in Iraq. But the cost of not acting against Saddam, I think, would have been much greater. And so is the cost, and so will be the cost, of not finishing the job. The President of the United States is a bold leader," he's talking about the little Bush, "and he's popular. 9 months ago, I voted with my colleagues to give the President of the United States of America the authority to use force, and I would vote that way again today. It was a right vote then, and it'd be a correct vote today," close quote. That's Biden in 2003, and there's no question that, of course, he voted in favor of the disastrous Iraq War. Comments on this program are welcome, as I said. Email me at carl@newsfromneptune.com. Finally, Aware honors those who reveal the crimes of the U.S. government, which the rest of the world knows about, but Americans don't. Assange, Manning, Snowden, and others, who are the real whistleblowers, truth-tellers persecuted by the U.S. government, including, by the way, our liberal the Democratic Senator Durbin, a shill for the Russiagate propaganda and unconstitutional attacks on the free press, notably in the case of WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange, who's being tortured and imprisoned by the U.S. government for the crime of telling the truth about our government's war crimes, something most Americans thought happened only in dictatorships. Perhaps they're right. Now, this is Carl Estabrook for the members and friends of AWARE, the anti-war, anti-racism effort of Champaign-Urbana, saying in the words of the late newsman Edward R. Murrow, good night and good luck.